Hello and welcome to the Retail Podcast. Now, last week, we did a show where we were talking about one of Rupert's customers and some of the activations that they had just gone through. I'm not going to provide any spoilers and I'll let Rupert do that. So, Rupert, the big reveal, for those who don't know you and don't know the marvelous agency that you have built, would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and what is that incredible agency that you've built?
Absolutely. And thanks, Alex, for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be on the show. So I'm Rupert Pick, Global MD of Hot Pickle, an agency I set up back in 2009, believe it or not, with two classmates from MBA school, one a jazz classical promoter and another environmental lawyer. Right. And we decided to create a brand experience business, which you might think is a little unusual given our kind of backgrounds. Although I had a brand background, so I was formerly at kind of Unilever. And the agency, in simple terms, does two things. It creates brand experiences for large brands, predominantly in the sort of FMCG, CPG world. And we do a product innovation for those similar companies, and primarily in the food and drink world. So most of our client base is food and drink, but not exclusively. We also operate in the kind of personal care and entertainment world too.
So I assume you operate from reading about you. You operate in the US as well, right? And you underneath a big rebrand as part of the US launch.
Yeah. So Patrick Hammond, who's one of the co-founders, is American. In fact, one of the other original co-founders, Barclay Rogers, who's no longer in the business, was also American. Yeah. After 15 years of grey winters and grey summers, he decided that he wanted to go back to the States. And we already had a number of US clients, and a lot of global brand teams are based out of the US. So it made complete sense to set up an office over there, an office in Winston-Salem in North Carolina, which is a kind of slightly unusual location. But actually in the States, what we've learned is it's such a big country. It doesn't matter where you're based as long as you're near an airport, and Charlotte is only around the corner. So yeah, Patrick and the team is based, we now have a US office sort of serving US clients, but we work globally. You know, we're in discussions on a project for Australia. We've done a large scale infrastructure retail experience in Shanghai and all across mainland Europe. So the team are pretty mobile.
Okay. So global agency servicing CPG brands.
Yeah.
Do you have sort of a strategic conviction that sort of steers your approach as the group MD or the global MD? How is that? Because there's such different diverse markets.
Yeah. So I guess there's a couple of things. We have a strategic direction in terms of who do we work with. So predominantly with consumer brands delivering physical brand experience or product innovation. Yeah. We tend to work with global brands because of the nature of the type of work we want to do with them and the types of work we're kind of well known for. You know, there are only a certain types of brands that are able to build, citadels to their brand for big physical experiences. We don't tend to do much work with, unless they're incredibly well funded, with the sort of startup brands. I mean, maybe a bit in the sort of challenger, but predominantly in established iconic brands that are big fan followings. They're the kind of people who want to build kind of big brand showcases. The other thing that is really directs our work is our capabilities. So we're not a classic creative agency in that you walk in the door with a budget and you come out with a series of creative ideas in the form of sort of presentations. Yeah. For our sins, we are really a turnkey solution for anyone wanting to deliver, this is on the experience side, a physical brand experience and operate it. So we do everything from the business modeling, so right at the front end, to the creative development, concept development, design, install, build, and then, interestingly, the operating of those physical experiences. Not with every single client, but with a great number. So we are sort of management consultancy, business modelers into creative agency, into retail operator, which is quite unusual.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever had a retailer come to you and ask you to build something for them?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Awesome. When you get just thinking about that. So we've worked for Waitrose. We've done work for Tesco's.
Okay.
We did work for Hellmann. It's quite. I think there's a really interesting space around retail. So what we're very good at is we're very good at developing new concepts and piloting them. We're not a global rollout business. If you want to go and build 400 stores, you don't come and talk to us.
Yeah.
And there are lots of retailers who are playing with ideas, whether that's as a capsule version of their offer or a totally different line extension to their retail operation. We're quite a good fit for that because we can take a project, but like a sort of skunk works team, go and develop a business model, develop the concept, operate it, and whether it's successful or not, hand it back to them. So yeah, we've had everything from kind of big box retailers through to D2C retailers. So HelloFresh would be a good example.
Yeah.
We developed a concept for them. They wanted to test a grocery line rather than the D2C line. And they said, okay, well, one of the interesting ways of doing that would be to kind of build a store. And then we can see if consumers are going to buy it within the store, but also we can have conversations with those consumers, a bit like a sort of a real market research test. And we did that for them in central London.
Wow. How do you protect these massive scale projects and brand homes, but yet you seem to sort of fearlessly continue to be creative? I mean, how do you protect that creativity when you're working with such large brands? Is there a formula for scaling playfulness?
So I think we're very fortunate in that pretty much every single client we work with that owns a big brand, or the brands themselves are pretty creative entities. So, or the individuals that work on them, and the ambition of the business is to be creative. You take Marmite's a great example. Actually, the Marmite business relative to sort of global brands is not that big a business. I mean, I can't remember exactly what the total size of the business is now. I used to run it actually for Unilever, but it's probably, 50 million plus. But in the scale of things in global brands, that's not very big. But it lauded creatively. It was only one of the best campaigns ever, and I was really fortunate to work on those campaigns when I was at Magnum's another good example. Guinness is another good example. Pokémon's another good example. These are great. These are big brands owned by big corporates who you'd expect to be quite conservative and bureaucratic, but actually they built those brands off the back of having a real, creative challenger mentality. Our job is really to take that ambition and then to translate it within the channel and spaces in which we operate. And most of the time, we're encouraged to push the envelope. I think the challenge often for our clients is that we're taking them into a space that most of the people that work in this business don't have a kind of extended length of practice and understanding and knowledge base. So a Unilever marketeer isn't a retailer. Yeah, they're not a hospitality owner. So saying to them, these are the things that we need to do within a physical space. This is what the Marmite retail experience is going to be like. This is how we're going to serve food in this space is alien and new to them. And understanding how they can take their knowledge and expertise in communication and translate that into something that's very tangible, that's three-dimensional, and in some case is human, is a bit of a departure. And that is the big creative leap that we have to take with our clients.
I'm just going to ask you a few questions that I've not shared with you, but just listening to you, I'm super curious. I'd love your opinion on it because I feel like it's a unique opportunity you're giving me. I'm a CMO of a multi-million pound brand, right? And I'm coming to you because I'm not relevant anymore. I'm really struggling. Sales are down. Where do you go? Like, where do you take me? What is it that I'm doing from your experience? Because you've just reeled off like a who's who of brands. But what's that sort of playbook in your mind? As long as it's not giving away your internal secret. But what would you say to me as the CMO to sort of get me to think about things in a different way? How do you do that?
I mean, so we are not the single solution to reviving a brand, but we're potentially part of the solution. And I think I won't be new in saying this, is the brands that are being most successful in the current age are part and embedded in culture. Yeah.
Yes.
They operate very differently to the brands that I was trained on, where the brand owner really owned the voice. We talk about in the business as having a dialogue with consumers, not a monologue. I was sort of trained in the world of monologues. Yeah. Make a very expensive advert, or make a very good and expensive advert, make a piece of film. Yeah. And then everything below that was kind of really icing on the cake. It's changed. It's flipped entirely now.
Yeah.
I still believe in TV advertising. I still believe in well-crafted pieces of above the line work. But if you look at the successful brands, the Magnums and the Guinnesses of this world, what they're brilliant at it now is about having tentacles into many different areas and being part of popular culture in its various guises. So whether that's with Magnum in film and in music and in just turning up on the street and letting consumers engage and play with things, and consumers of all natures. So right up from kind of Uber influencers right down to your average Joe who's turning up at Tesco and kind of and Sainsbury's. And I think that is the thing that I would be saying to CEOs is, go and search for the places where people are genuinely connecting with your brand and go and amplify and elevate those things. Don't try and create them, but go hunting. And there's a wonderful marketeer, very talented marketeer at Unilever, Vicky Rogers, who works on the Rexona brand. And she's brilliant because she just gets absorbed in little, kind of rabbit warrens and finds consumers and finds cohorts of people in subcultures and then has a kind of innate way of being able to then have a dialogue with them and turn that into something bigger. And I think that's the challenge is go looking for the consumers and the cultures that you can bring to life as a brand owner.
So obviously one of the skills and successes that you've got that you've mentioned is the fact that you're doing these activations in physical in the real world, and not at a massive scale, but at a scale that's enough to build hype, buzz, scarcity, need. And you mentioned sampling there.
Yeah.
In all of these interactions that you had with CMOs and marketing teams, what's the one thing that always is there one thing that surprises you? Is there like a thing that people aren't thinking about when they come to you, or an outcome from doing these projects that, like sampling around, does everyone naturally think we've got to create a sampling experience?
No, I think the bit that surprises me is that people can be a bit transactional. And
It's trace fail, basically. How many are going to shift?
Yeah. But and they're rather unambitious in the opportunities on offer to do something that is a little bit more, I say, experiential, a bit more memorable, when they're spending, significant sums of money throwing out product to consumers, and then they're reduced down to the lowest common denominator. If I take a good example, so we don't tend to do that sort of very transactional sampling of here's a dump bin and I'm going to lob lots of that in a train station. But we did do a train station sampling campaign for Magnum around a campaign called Stick to the Original, Waterloo Station. And rather than just have dump bins of ice cream, and it's quite easy to get rid of ice cream, even in the depths of winter in the UK, we had 12-piece orchestra with a bespoke curated score that was based on the score from the advert, playing music on a bandstand, elevated bandstand, whilst people had a sample. And the difference was remarkable, So rather than grab the products, enjoy the products in isolation, people were spending time eating the product, surrounding this space, listening to great music, taking pictures of the orchestra performing in a wonderful amphitheatre and kind of music hall, which Waterloo Station is.
Yeah.
Relatively little additional cost, just some consideration and creativity. And I think that's the bit that I'm surprised at is how few businesses kind of push things creatively and say, look, we're going to commit to this form of activation. Now let's make it stand out too. Let's be more than just the number of products we put in people's hands.
You mentioned, so obviously I can talk to you forever. Honestly, I can keep just asking you questions, and I'm just looking at the time. I've got to sort of think about bringing it to my last question. Again, going back to the brand manager.
We need any more time? That's fine. And we can have a couple more questions. It's fine.
Yeah, what I want to do is, a lot of the times I talk to my guests and I ask them a lot of questions, but I don't get into the how, right? Because a CMO or a brand manager, obviously they have to go on a journey. And as you said, maybe they need to be open, they need to be awake. But it feels like right now, today, they are getting smacked left, right, and center from social, from different new digital channels, from AI and, all the elements. And so how do I, as a brand manager, what are the constructive steps over the next 5 years that I need to think about to protect my brand? Or as you said, how the heck, apart from obviously employing really cool agencies, maintain my cultural, subcultural relevance, right? What are those practical things that I need to do? Or maybe, you know what? They're not even the questions that they will be thinking, because I'm just making up what I think. And you sit down with these brand managers. But the question really being is, how do I look into the next 5 years and maintain my authority, my relevance?
I mean, you make a great point. I think the most important thing that CMOs that need to consider, and I have a few friends of mine from my Unilever days who are in those kind of positions, is as you said, stay relevant. Yeah. And how do you stay relevant? By having a really good understanding of your consumer and of culture. Yeah. And I think if the most practical thing you can do is listen to the consumer, it's not new, but listen to the consumer, and surround yourself with people who are really plugged in. And I think that is people it's not just about people at the kind of crazy peripheries of society, of culture, but also people who are in mainstream society. If I take one good example, we're very fortunate to work on the Hellmann's brand.
Yeah.
And, believe it or not, the world of sandwiching is having a revival. Now, the format of a sandwich hasn't changed a great deal, and sandwiching isn't a kind of new idea in any way. But what we're seeing is this sort of subculture of people making sandwiches like they're kind of works of art. And you're getting the emergence of sandwich shops that, charging sort of 10, 15 pounds, incredible sandwiches, really indulgent, really elaborate, very foodie. How big is this stack? How wide is this stack? What breads am I using? Crazy, detail.
Yeah.
That didn't really exist about 18 months ago. And for a big brand like, Hellmann's, they need to be part of that conversation, not necessarily only in the conversation, but need to be part of that conversation. So, but if you are not plugged into the food scene and you're not plugged into the subcultures within the food scene, you could miss that entirely. And as a brand where there's a product role, it's vital you're part of that conversation. So, and what I do know is that culture moves on very quickly. So what is hot today is not going to be hot 12 months down the line. So the other challenge is plug yourself into culture, find the people who are connected to culture, and continually innovate within those spaces. Because if you stick with the same message, I can assure you, 18, 24 months down the line, you start to look tired and redundant. And we see this in the world of lifestyle. I kind of feel like, Nike's lost its way a bit, doesn't feel as relevant in culture. Whereas,
look how good Adidas is doing.
Yeah.
In the US, they're doing Samuel L. Jackson, Missy Elliott, and activation with skateboarders, while in the UK, they're selling bucket hats with Oasis.
Yeah.
To me, what a perfect, and I've got example because, again, all of my guests on the shows have all spoken about Adidas in their local communities. And I wish I could remember the cultural clothes that they wear in Saudi Arabia. But I forget, the ladies wear it. So to protect the modesty, there's like this gown that you wear. I was talking to my co-host out there, and she was saying, Adidas have just created this amazing thing that I wear. And the girls in the office are like, oh my God, where did you get that from? Where's that from? And it's like, what a perfect example.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is, even in these big global brands, you think that, we live in a sort of monoculture. We don't. There's subcultures within, every society, and across geographies, people operate slightly differently. And I think the best brands are able to have this, as I said, this sort of tentacle approach where they're able to have a consistent strategy, but show up differently in different places in ways entirely relevant, authentic, appropriate for that particular kind of population.
Do you think that's a generation, Gen Z, as in Gen Alpha, Gen Z, they are now, that's what they're looking for, whereas boomers and Gen Xers, they're so loyal to a brand even when they've lost, because when you look at, specifically in the UK, you look at the brands that are struggling, and this week or month, there's been Claire's in the news, there's been River Island in the news, there's been eBuyer in the news. And I'm thinking they must have sat there thinking, how do we maintain relevance? But something went wrong, right? Somehow they dropped out of, like Nike. They've made some, one decision leads to another decision that leads to another decision. That then all of a sudden they're just not relevant in their consumer's life, which I think, speaking to you, feels like an art form that you probably think is natural. but it probably isn't, right? I think that's, I don't know, that to me feels like maybe some of the secret to your success is these things that you naturally have
Yeah.
that doesn't exist out there.
What's quite interesting is I think there's a challenge in fashion and some of the lifestyle fashion brands. So you mentioned Revline, you mentioned Nike, where product is so key to that relevance piece.
Yeah.
Yet product is always changing. It in let's say the booze world or the food world, often those products, they're constants. Guinness has not changed in 100 years. The treatment, or 200 and something years, the treatment of that brand is different. Whereas Nike not only needs to keep its communication current, it needs to keep its product current. So I think they have even more challenges than some of the kind of food and drink brands that we often.
I don't know. Right? Look at Biro and Tom Holland for Wimbledon activation, right? Non-alcoholic beer. You have to sell.
Yes, yeah.
So I think I don't think it's going to outsell, but alcohol sales are definitely declining. So for Guinness to maintain its relevance, as you said, they need to be doing these physical activations. Is there anything when you've done all these, like obviously music seems to be something that you implied when you were talking about the Magnum experience. Are there any other physical senses that you feel brands sometimes overlook because they're just looking at, maybe taste, but forgetting about the scent?
Fragrance. So it's fragrance. In a physical sense, fragrance is so often, well, everyone goes to the visual aesthetic on the whole. Yeah, as the other, let me design this store beautifully. What color is on the walls? What pictures are we using? What's the visual merchandising looking like?
Yeah.
And actually, walk into I would take Soho House as a good example. They have a very distinctive kind of smell.
Yeah.
The power of fragrance to transform people. I was brought up in the Far East, and every time I go back to kind of Hong Kong, I walk out the airport and I feel at home, even though I lived there only till I was 8 years old. It's because of the audio. It's because of the fragrance of the place. Actually, it's not about the visual aesthetic, because the visual aesthetic in many places has kind of changed.
Yeah.
I think we talk about the experiential and emotive fingerprint of an experience. Is its multiple touch points that make up the total experience, and so much of it is also a human experience. It is, how you are approached by another person, how you are spoken to by another person. If you think about some of your richest, and I inverted commas, kind of brand experiences, and I would say kind of, restaurant experience, hotels experience, probably the most memorable ones are where you've had fantastic service, or you've had a great interaction with the people around you. You probably don't remember necessarily what you sat on or what you saw on the wall, but you'll remember the conversations and the dialogue that you had. So yeah, I think it's everyone would say this, but it is a real 360 brand experience that you need to look at, and you can't overlook any one of them.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing from the retail podcast thing is the fact that all of your activations in the physical world constantly prove that this new generation, as well as other generations, are still looking for that interaction in a physical space. Yes, they love digital. Yes, they love social, but they still are looking and hungry for physical activations, right? That I presume.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, concerts are around, festivals are around, great restaurants. There's lines going around the corner for a new donut retail. Every pop up in London that is decent. There's some stuff that isn't well produced, but we are social beings. We great going to physical spaces, and I was concerned when in the sort of, I guess, early 2010, I was thinking, crikey, I'm running an analog business here and everyone's going digital. I'm thinking, am I the Luddite in the room? And then I realized that actually the two things can live side by side, and in fact, it's the digital world that has created this energy and this passion and this anticipation for physical experiences. And, look what happened after COVID. Everyone rushed out to go and to be in social. They actually like being locked up in our houses just on screens. So there's a role for both. I think what's interesting now is just integrating those physical experiences into the digital world and understanding how those two things work together. So when we are producing our work, we are thinking about the people that are experiencing the spaces, but also their friends and their families and their communities and how they're experiencing them vicariously through the people that have been in attendance. So, the two things need to kind of sit together.
Is there one question that I should have asked you and I didn't?
So great. That itself is a great question. You asked, I think in an email is, what do I think the kind of brand home of the future would be?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I know exactly, but I think I do know that there are going to be many more of them, because I think well-crafted brands, if they are retailer-orientated brands, they'll reduce their footprint in the estate and invest in really great experiences. So they'll have less of them, but they'll be better.
Yeah.
And I think the brands that aren't retailers understand the importance of community and understand how community really does build a brand these days. You cannot rely on the brand just being a megaphone. You need the brand to be the sort of the trigger for communication. It's a bit like a sort of throwing the stone into a pond, and then the conversations then flow from you starting or building into the conversation. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see more and more elaborate experiences. I think we're going to see brand homes where the manifestation, the expression of the brand is more elaborate. It isn't just about the product. It isn't just about, take Guinness, it isn't just about having a bar. Yeah. It's about having a space that evokes the spirit of the brand. So it might have a hospitality piece. It might have a bar. It might have a museum. It might have a training space. Multi-layered, multifaceted experiences. We're seeing some lovely, lovely brand homes across the world. And I'm really excited by the development of them as sort of visitor attractions, hospitality spaces, showcases to brands, as people just crave being in and around others and sharing knowledge, sharing ideas, sharing passion with like-minded souls.
Yeah, I was in Shanghai last year, and it's like, I always feel awkward saying this. I wrote a book about the future of retail, right? And what the physical experience is. And a lot of it I took from what I saw at Shanghai. And one of the things that reflects what you said, almost every single space, retail, whether it's Brompton selling bikes, whether it's buying a Hawaii car, whether it's buying Vans trainers, all of them had some form of drinks, a space that was not for transaction. It was there. And in the book, I talk about how if your customer is your family and you reframe the way that you think about them, there's got to be a time and a space where it's not about the transaction. Yeah. It's about hanging out. Like you were just saying. And anyway,
Alistair, you're spot on. People have so much more choice now. Are they more choiceful? I think they probably are. They want to dig a bit deeper. Why is it that the founder story is so compelling these days? Yeah. I think it's not because all founders are sort of narcissists and feel like they have to tell their story. I think people genuinely want to know what's behind a business. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the physical store does that, and you can really tell when you go to a really well-run physical brand experience with passionate kind of brand ambassadors who really understand the business, really understand the product, really excited and energized by what the space in which they're working. It's pretty compelling.
Yeah.
And I think that's, to your point exactly, it's about generosity of the brand. You walk into days of, let's put some grocery environments to one side for a second, but the days of kind of just going into a place and it's just about transaction, it's just about shelves and racking, I think are gone.
You don't even have to go to grocery. Look at the problems Burberry, Gucci, so many of the luxury brands are having are because they're just treating their spaces as this, let me tell you more about me. It's like that friend that you don't want to hang out with.
Yeah.
Because all they ever do is talk about themselves, right? It's like, where is me in that conversation? Where do I appear? And, in the podcast, I jokingly said, hey, Gucci, maybe they should come and hang out with Rupert and the team and ask about how do we create more Marmite, Magnum-esque experiences, because those types of spaces, I think, they don't serve anything apart from your bottom line. And this new generation has a different philosophy when it comes to interacting with brands.
And I think it's a really great point. Circling back to the conversation we were having earlier is around culture changes. To be a luxury brand 10, 15 years ago was to be a bit like an art form.
Yeah.
You created an installation. Your store was slightly aloof, slightly inaccessible in order to create this sort of allure of scarcity.
Yeah.
Slightly removed. Now, I think the best luxury brands are approachable. They are confident that they're able to do collaborations. They're able to operate with brands from very different sort of ends of the kind of pricing spectrum. Don't take themselves too seriously. They have some levity there. But too many of the sort of iconic historic brands are still stuck in a culture of, the 1990s and early 2000s. And I think that is the critical job of any kind of good and talented marketeer, is stay curious, plug yourself in culture, be continually adapting and changing, because if to which you just start with the point in which you become redundant.
Yeah. And I think that's a lovely way to end the show on. Rupert, thank you so much for giving.
Really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely.
Goodbye, and thanks very much.